Here we go, folks. And welcome to the Dean Obeidallah Show. Right now, very happy to welcome someone everyone knows. Mike Fanone served as a law enforcement officer for more than 20 years, was on U.S. Capitol Police, then the Metropolitan Police Department. We all know he stood up on January 6th for our democracy and our freedoms. He was badly injured, and now he's an advocate for our freedoms and our democracy nonstop, all the time. Mike, thanks so much for being on.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me, man. It's great to be here.
Sure. So, my friend, let's talk about. Look, I want in the big picture. I was mentioning, I just interviewed Alex Vindman right before we chatted here, and Alex Vindman, everyone knows, he served for 20 plus years in the military. He was a whistleblower in the first impeachment. He was the one that said about Trump trying to shake down Zelensky, and he attributed so much to what we're going through now with Trump that he was never held accountable for an attempting a coup, for the terrorist attack. And January 6th was an act of domestic terrorism incited by Donald Trump. How much of it, I mean, you're law enforcement, if you don't hold a criminal accountable, do they tend to commit more crimes after that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, that's why we have a criminal justice system in this country. People need to be held accountable when they break the law. This is a nation of laws, or at least it used to be. And the biggest mechanism that we had, I mean, we talk about in law enforcement all the time, is the threat of or the fear of going to prison. I mean, shit. I think about doing things every single day, but don't do them because I'd go to prison, and that's not where I want to go. And so it is a deterrent when it's in place. But right now, what we're experiencing is an administration that has no accountability whatsoever. It controls all the traditional mechanisms of institutional accountability, the Department of Justice, the FBI, all of these different agencies that have served us well in the past are now loyal, not to the American people, not to the U.S. Constitution, but to Donald Trump.
Is it when you lay it out there and you did so well, when you take a step back, look at America right now. You've got Donald Trump using DOJ to prosecute political opponents, who's raking in billions in corruption, who's putting the military in the streets in Minneapolis, and he calls ICE his troops, and they are oppressing and killing people. They've gone after everything from comedians with Jimmy Kimmel to law firms to universities to Don Lemon and more. If you read about another country like that, Mike, would you say that's a democracy with a functioning constitution?
Hell no. I mean, you don't have to be a detective to recognize the fact that, we've delved now into an authoritarian, pseudo dictatorship. Everybody always makes this argument that, well, we had free and fair elections the last go around. But every single thing that this administration is doing is telling us that we are not going to have free and fair elections going forward. And so that's the argument that I always make against whether it's politicians or other people in the political space that are saying like, oh, calm down. We're going to take back the House and maybe the Senate in the midterms. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, what are you talking about? These policies are so egregious. The American people have turned on this administration in such massive numbers. We've seen record-breaking protests, people who are getting involved that have never gotten involved before, young people, old people, people my age, what have you. This administration never thought that they were going to win the midterm elections on these policies.
Right.
And so, that should be evident to every American at this point. What we've seen with ICE and CBP and the deployment of the National Guard into American streets, which, by the way, goes against, everything that I ever understood the traditional Republican Party to stand for. The limited federal involvement in, states' day-to-day running and individual American lives. Right. And now we're seeing a federal government that is controlling every aspect of everyone's life, and not doing a great job of it. I mean, they're destroying the country.
So, by the way, I like how you said young people, old people, and people my age. So whatever that might be, that's the best answer ever. Like, what are you? We're not young, old, or my age. That's it. So look, when you're talking about the election is, and on my radio show, that's the number one issue people call up upon. When I do Substack Live and I ask people about what are the top issues, having a full and fair election this November is a topic, because without that, nothing else matters. Any policy we want to advocate, if we don't have control, we can't. And plus, with the White House, obviously we can't make it law, but we can stop this guy. the question is, what do we do? And there's no simple answer, but what is your sense? I guess from the point of view of law enforcement, what would you recommend we do as we get closer to November?
I mean, absolutely everything that we possibly can.
Mhm.
If you're a citizen, go out and vote. That's the least you can do to maintain this democracy. If you're a politician, you should be doing absolutely everything you can to stop this administration. I tell people all the time, like, I don't care if the Republican Party comes out with legislation that would award every child in America a stuffed animal. Fucking vote no. No. You shouldn't be voting for any of their legislation. You
Right.
should be doing everything you can to shut this government down, so that we can find a way to administer some accountability. And if shutting the government down is accountability, then so be it. And it's going to take people who are willing to be uncomfortable. Don Lemon and I talk about this all the time, and we actually had a conversation right before he got arrested.
Wow.
I said, it's going to take people getting arrested. It's going to take people being uncomfortable and who are willing to do that. And obviously, Don was willing to do that. And that's, it's a scary thought. It's troubling, but we're in really scary and troubling times. And, the American people, um, that's who we are. We're people who are willing to endure discomfort to ensure not only our own freedoms, but the freedoms of future generations.
Mike, you hit on a point that I couldn't agree with you more. And I say this all the time on my show. I don't think Donald Trump knows what it means to be an American. And what I mean by that, he doesn't understand. He thinks he could be a king or a tyrant, and we're going to just sit and take it. In our DNA, every American from childhood, you're taught about this story about these colonists who rise up against the superpower of the time, Great Britain, because their king was a tyrant and he was brutal and he crushed the people. And they said no, and they stood up to him. And the more Trump pushes on us, he doesn't get. I think that's the more of a reaction from our end. And that's why I say I don't think he understands what it means to truly be an American. He was born into wealthy. He thinks he's an elitist, like he's some kind of aristocrat, and that we are here as some kind of vassals or servants for him. We're not. We're American citizens. That's why people are going to come up big number. I don't know how they're going to stop it, but what do you think? I mean, do you think deep down this guy doesn't get what this country is really about?
I don't think he cares.
Ah, it's true.
I think that I always go back to like JFK's speech and, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. I
Yep.
think Donald Trump like heard that, he was dyslexic and he heard it in reverse. He thinks that the American people exist to enrich him, and to empower him, and to allow him to live this lavish lifestyle, that, he has at least pretended to exist in his entire life. Um, I also think that, I have a theory about Donald Trump. I think that, when Trump talked about being the retribution for the MAGA movement, I think what he was really saying was, I am going to be the retribution for myself.
Mm-hmm.
I lost the 2020 election, and he's just as angry at the people that he views as his stupid base, his dumb redneck supporters, as he is at people that voted against him. And so this is his "if I can't have you, no one can" moment, and he is just going to destroy America, um, while grifting as much as he possibly can, in the process.
This is the country we live in today. It is stunning when you take a step back and look at what he's doing and what we're navigating through, what we're living through. It's a time we almost step up. That's the reality. Today, Pam Bondi is testifying before Congress. What's remarkable? The whole thing is just fighting and being competitive. It's
Yeah.
theater, it's a show. What I don't understand is why Democrats don't ask this question. She was the Attorney General of Florida from 2011 to 2019. From 2011 to 2019, Jeffrey Epstein was running a child rape ring in her state. At that very time, it was still going on. He was still abusing women. She never investigated him, yet she investigated others for child sex crimes. And for the life of me, I don't get, because it seems Pam Bondi's been part of the cover up for the longest time, and not just for Trump, not just for Epstein, but other powerful men, Democrat and Republican, who went for Jeffrey Epstein to be able to have sex with children or traffic women.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, it doesn't take a detective to recognize the fact that, I mean, look at all the different people, all the players during that time period around the original Jeffrey Epstein investigation, where I think he was sentenced to a whopping 3 years in some minimum security prison that we now know he was allowed to leave pretty much at
Mhm.
leisure, and, do whatever it was that he wanted to do. Look at all the people that were involved in that investigation, powerful people who now have either cushy or influential positions within this administration. You've got Lutnick,
Yep.
you've got Alex Acosta, you just mentioned Pam Bondi, and the list goes on and on and on of officials, administration officials, who it now is, being revealed were either guests of Jeffrey Epstein doing God knows what, or they were involved in really scuttling this criminal investigation into what, we're all now starting to find out was a really demonic um, ring of child sex exploitation.
As someone who was law enforcement, is it beyond the pale of common sense, like, unbelievable that no one else is gonna be charged with Jeffrey Epstein? The DOJ said there's over 1,000 victims. You have victim statements in the files now that they redacted from us. You have victims there. Lisa Phillips, who's been on my show a few times, is in the hearing today, and others who are there to come forward to talk about what happened to them, how they were trafficked, who trafficked them, and the ones who were children who were raped. Yet Pam Bondi today, again, her answer to the question about charging people is like, "Why didn't you ask Merrick Garland that?" What a cop out answer. You're AG now, but do you think? I mean, there's statements and there's some photos. Is that enough to at least get to the point of a formal investigation to certain of these men if the statute of limitations is not run yet?
Absolutely. And if you want to investigate the previous administration's Department of Justice and Merrick Garland's handling of that investigation, throw him in there as well. But let's at least have some transparency, which is what, this administration, what Donald Trump ran on. That was almost the entirety of his platform when it came to, righting the wrongs of our criminal justice system was transparency, transparency, transparency. And all we're getting is redaction, 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 and lying and deflecting and distracting from, this obvious elephant in the room, which is the relationship between Donald Trump, our president, and Jeffrey Epstein, a disgusting pedophile.
As former law enforcement, do you? I don't want you to be speculating, just guess, but the way Trump is covering up so much and been or every time, move on. We don't need to see the files. He tried to block all the files last year from us seeing it after the first part came out. What does that say to you as someone who served 20 years in law enforcement?
I mean, listen, he's behaving like every criminal that I ever interacted with over the course of my 20-year career, which is in the thousands. He distracts, deflects, points the finger at someone else. But the paperwork speaks for itself, and we're only getting a very limited
Yeah.
perspective into, what's happening here. And even me, just looking at some of these allegations, would say this clearly warrants a criminal investigation. I don't understand how Pam Bondi and Kash Patel can take the position that, this case is essentially closed and that they have exhausted all leads. I mean, you had uh, survivors who were in the gallery at today's hearing who raised their hands and said that they have been trying to contact the Department of Justice to get meetings with prosecutors to talk about their experiences for years, and that they can't get a meeting with the DOJ. And you couldn't get Pam Bondi to give a straight answer and say that she'll commit to meeting with those people. And so it's clearly a cover up. It's clearly being, done by Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, Donald Trump, the administration. What I'm looking for is, where are these frontline FBI agents that actually conducted this investigation? And why aren't they coming out and
Hmm.
talking about at what's going on here, what their experience was in this investigation? It's gotten to a point now, and I understand that, that could be problematic for their careers, but this is a crime of epic proportions. If ever there was a time to break protocol or violate departmental policy or agency policy, I think that this one is it.
Yeah, this was an international blackmail ring, and that's That's based on Lisa Phillips, again, who was on my show last week, and she was on a few months ago as well. And then she made the point Jeffrey Epstein was not recruiting these women just for some sexual gratification for himself. He told her, I'm building something. And what he meant was this big commerce ring, which was a blackmail ring, with people in various countries. And that's what was going on. So there are so many, this might be the biggest sex ring, child rape ring that we've ever seen in our lives, that known about. Thousands involved, thousands of men involved, powerful men, and more than 1,000 victims. And that's DOJ saying that. So look, there need to be accountability. That's part of healing. That's what the victims talk about. And I really wish, like, we didn't even make it about Trump as much on Epstein. This is for the victims. They deserve accountability. When I speak to Lisa, and she talked about the others as well, they want healing. They want the files to heal, and they want people put in jail. I mean, again, when you worked as a police officer, putting criminals in jail who victimize people, did that help those people on some level heal?
I mean, listen, I, you know, I received a tremendous amount of gratification when the 6 people that violently assaulted me on January 6th
True.
pled guilty or sentenced and went to prison. And then Donald Trump pardoned them all. And so, I feel like I have, can relate with some of these victims in that they've gone through this traumatic experience, and the administration is either denying that it's real, which we're all watching play out in real time. And you had Donald Trump say the other day, it's time for the American people to move on beyond the Epstein files. And so you're leaving hundreds, potentially thousands of victims out there who had their lives utterly destroyed, not just by the traumatic events that they experienced on Epstein Island or at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, and who the hell else knows, who, but in experiencing this administration's lack of empathy and compassion for them, and viewing them as really an inconvenience to be ignored.
Is there any doubt in your mind that Donald Trump should be in a prison cell right now?
No. I mean, I I don't know if I've ever, I've come across some people with some pretty long rap sheets, and I don't know if I have ever seen one human being who has been more of a one-man crime spree than Donald Trump. And it's almost worse because than the criminals I dealt with, in that the impact has been felt by so many more people. At this point, he's the president of the United States. He's the most powerful man in the world. It's not just American citizens that are suffering under his hand. It's the entire world. And another point that I want to make about the accountability, Dean, is you're watching this in real time dismantle other governments, foreign governments. You're watching the chaos and the accountability play out across the world stage everywhere except for here. Everywhere except for here, and with the one man who we now know is mentioned not just 38,000 times, but over 1 million times, according to, lawmakers who have viewed the unredacted files. 1 million times in the Epstein files.
Donald Trump in 2002, as a reminder, and you know this, Mike, and I bet you many listening know it as well. In 2002 is the time Donald Trump spoke to New York Magazine and said Jeffrey Epstein was his terrific friend. They've been friends for 15 years, and he likes women as much as he does, but on the younger side. That was 2002. That was in the midst of a child sex ring that had been going on, a child rape ring, for over a decade at that point. At the trial of Ghislaine Maxwell, one of the victims testified when she was 14. Jeffrey Epstein brought her to Mar-a-Lago to meet Trump. Jeffrey Epstein was introducing the children he was raping to Donald Trump. That's on sworn testimony in a federal trial that DOJ prosecuted that case against Ghislaine Maxwell. The guy should be in prison for so many things, whatever role in that. And of course, the January 6th. You mentioned the FBI and Kash Patel. If you saw evidence now of a federal crime, would you feel confident to go to this FBI?
No, absolutely not. I feel like all of these agencies are now tainted. I mean, I've talked about this ad nauseum. Under this administration, I certainly would never report anything to the FBI. I did initially when I was receiving threats against myself and my family members in multiple different jurisdictions, and was looking for, a federal entity to coordinate rather than constantly contacting local law enforcement at all of these different places, and received no response whatsoever.
Wow.
And so I think the messaging is clear here that, if you are an outspoken critic of this administration, you're going to be dealt with or treated one way. And if you are an advocate or somebody who even commits criminal acts at the behest of or, in concert with this administration, you will be absolved of all criminal accountability.
I can't believe you called the FBI to talk about the threats and no one responded. And we all know, everyone listening and watching, that that was intentional because they know who you are. This is the country that we live in now. We have a DOJ prosecutor. I mean, last night we learned stunning news, which should be a bigger story, but Pam Bondi is testifying. DOJ wanted to prosecute 6 Democratic members of Congress. They already prosecuted Representative McIver from New Jersey for being an ICE protest, and she bumped into an ICE agent. Well, in a scrum, you don't charge someone with assault for that, but they did. They indicted her. And if Trump had his way, we'd have 6 members of Congress. There'd be 7 Democrats facing serious criminal jail time just for defying this administration. This is beyond weaponization. This is exactly what we see in authoritarian regimes in other countries.
Absolutely. And I mean, the old adage of, I know you're good friends with Glenn Kirshner, and he
Good
can say
guy.
as well as I can that you can indict a ham sandwich.
Mhm.
That is true. In my entire career, and I testified before grand juries hundreds and hundreds of times, probably thousands.
Right.
And of those, I only remember specifically a handful of cases in which we did not get an indictment. And I know exactly when it was. It was right after the shooting death of George Floyd.
Ah.
And we had a grand jury, several grand juries actually at the time, that no longer trusted law enforcement. And, to be honest with you, I couldn't blame them.
Mhm.
So they were voting down each and every case, regardless of, I mean, listen, I worked narcotics. Those cases were pretty cut and dry. It was like I, as an undercover, either bought drugs from you or observed you selling drugs. These were easy cases, but we couldn't get an indictment. And it's because the people lost faith in law enforcement. And that's exactly what we're experiencing here. We saw it with Letitia James,
Mhm.
saw it with James Comey. Now we're experiencing it again because people recognize the fact that these are politically motivated prosecutions, and they see them exactly for what they are. And
Yep.
so, unfortunately, I don't think that I think that we're going to continue to see this pattern long into the future of Americans who have lost faith in not only the criminal justice system as a whole, but specifically in law enforcement agencies. And it's going to take a really long time to rebuild that trust.
Part of the playbook for authoritarians is the idea of undermining all institutions, so there's no checks on them whatsoever, and that's what Trump's doing. As an aside, by the way, Mike, you mentioned the indicting a ham sandwich. I'm Muslim, so I think you should indict a ham sandwich. No, I'm kidding. Eat whatever you want, folks. I'm just saying turkey bacon is better for you. You don't
Yeah,
want to eat turkey bacon. So I wanted to touch on 2 last things dealing with ICE. Yesterday, the head of ICE testified, Todd Lyons, and was pressed by Democrats. Will you commit to ICE agents not being masked and wearing their nameplate? And he said, nope, I will not do that. As someone who was in law enforcement, if you're in uniform and you're masked and you're not wearing a nameplate, what is the message you're sending? What is really going on here? And what do you think is the mindset of an armed, masked ICE agent who's told by Donald Trump, you got absolute immunity, so do whatever you want?
yeah, no, it's un-American. I've also been speaking quite a bit about ICE and CBP and the way that they've been conducting themselves in American streets and cities. And I really think that the corruption and the corrosion there goes far beyond this administration, because at the end of the day, every American law enforcement agency has been told by this administration that the gloves are off. They've heard Donald Trump say that you can, if they spit, you can hit. They've heard
Yep.
Stephen Miller go around and tell them all that they have immunity. I mean, even my former employer, the Metropolitan Police Department of Washington, D.C., Pam Bondi, Stephen Miller, they went around to all the different roll calls and basically said the same things. And so why is it that every law enforcement agency in this country has basically been told that you can ignore the Constitution and abuse American citizens, but the only agencies that are doing it are CBP and ICE. So I think that's a question that we need to talk about, the culture of those agencies and how they've been conducting themselves probably long before they were emboldened by this administration. But you have an agency now under Kristi Noem, really under Stephen Miller, and the administration that is unaccountable to the American people. They disobey court orders almost as regularly as they receive them. In Chicago, I think was like a 30 or 60-day period, they had disregarded over 100 court orders in that time period. We've seen them execute American citizens.
Mm-hmm.
Chicago, we saw them shoot a woman 5 times, lie about the circumstances in which they justified the shooting. It all came out in court. Multiple agents were found to have perjured themselves, Bavino being one of them. That case was ultimately dismissed. It boggles my mind how you have a case in which a federal agent or any law enforcement officer uses deadly force against an American citizen and no criminal charges are brought whatsoever. That in and of itself should have forced a recall of all of these agents back to the border where they fucking belong, and putting a pause on the way that this administration is carrying out its immigration enforcement. But it didn't. They doubled down, and they continue to double down, and they continue to move forward. I mean, we saw Bavino go and Tom Homan come in. I'm always reminded of this. There was a scene in one of my favorite movies, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, where one of the characters says, one bastard goes out, another bastard comes in. And, Tom Homan he's cut from the same cloth as Greg Bavino or vice versa. And, this removal of 700 agents, when they had over 3,000 deployed there, almost 4 times the amount of law enforcement officers they have in that jurisdiction, it's for show. Plus, they sent them to another place where they're going to go and conduct, this similar types of operations. And so it's terrifying. They need to be disbanded. I recognize, the importance of immigration enforcement. I certainly believe in that. That being said, ICE and CBP have proven themselves to be an agency that acts extrajudiciously, and those people should be prohibited from serving in law enforcement capacity forever.
Amen. And, the idea of reforming ICE, you could do that to an agency in general. In this case, and I went through it on my show, the ICE crimes and their crimes is not just in one place. It's not just Minneapolis. It's in Maryland. It's in Maine. It's in New York. It's in California. It's in Portland. That's the culture of the organization. So yeah, if you can get rid of all the bad people, I don't know how you do that, or just get rid of the agency and start anew and people who've served in. But it gets back, before we wrap up, Michael, it goes back to the first point we started with, accountability. Abolish ICE is one thing. I just think it's also accountability means prosecute ICE. Prosecute ICE agents who are involved in crimes. Because if not, you're going to see more of this. I really wish the Democratic AGs, and I have some on my show, I'm almost literally begging them, charge a couple of them. Because share with us as someone in law enforcement, if you were still in law enforcement, if a few officers in your ranks get charged for certain conduct, would it make you think twice about replicating that conduct, even while that case is at least while it's pending that case?
I don't have to just think about that in the abstract. I could talk about that from real world.
Please do.
Yes, absolutely. Watching, fellow law enforcement officers get prosecuted, absolutely is. And to be honest with you, I think it's a positive thing if the prosecutions are warranted, in that it makes each and every law enforcement officer start to think when they may have become complacent about their, physical altercations or physical interactions with American citizens. And it's a good refresher that you yourself are not above the law. Because when you're involved in the career or profession of enforcing the law, there is absolutely a tendency to start to believe that because you represent the law, that you in fact are above it. It's a
Ah,
pitfall that everybody falls into in the career field. I certainly fell into it from time to time. Fortunately for me, I had really good colleagues, really good mentors. And I think, I like to think myself as a critical thinker and was capable of recognizing, the moment for what it was. But yes, I agree. It enrages me that in Minneapolis we didn't see the attorney general there start to conduct a parallel investigation. I mean, listen, I get it. You're not going to have access to certain things that were
right.
recovered at the scene, but you have a lot of video evidence. You still can interview witnesses.
Mhm.
You can, still get search warrants. If they're denied, then, that becomes part of your criminal case. You can subpoena things. I mean, there's a lot of things that can be done and should be done in the moment rather than just kind of sitting back and saying, this is outrageous, but please protest peacefully. The American people are not going to stand idly by while themselves and their neighbors are victimized at the hands of the state.
And that's because we know what it means to be an American and Donald Trump doesn't. And it turns out Keith Ellison is a friend of mine. He comes on every month, and they are trying to investigate. I think what they're navigating is the supremacy clause defense. But my whole point is charge them and let them assert their immunity in a
Right.
trial where they first have to get processed and fingerprinted and maybe put on leave, and maybe they get a lawyer for free or maybe they don't, but still have to worry about their liberty. So let them assert it. They have every right to assert a supremacy clause defense, but don't give them the benefit of the doubt. Go to the grand jury, indict them, and let them assert the defense. That's fine. I believe I'm a lawyer. Let them have that. But don't dissuade yourself from going to the grand jury to charge it because there's an immunity defense.
Totally agree. And it sends a message to the American people. One, that you're willing to hold these individuals accountable. But number two, if they watch that process play out and these people are let off by the courts because they have some, immunity, that's going to make Americans even more angry. Um,
That's a
and
great point.
and that's what we need. We need to, you have to. I tell people all the time, politicians,
Yeah.
whoever, exhaust every option. Um, you know, Jamie Raskin, good guy. Uh, Probably not going to go out in the streets and pick up a baseball
Right.
bat, but he can do a lot of things with a pen and paper. Exhaust every option. Let it play out before the American people. Let them see that this is dictatorship. Let them
Mhm.
see that Donald Trump doesn't care about the Constitution, doesn't care about your individual rights, and is willing to trample all over them.
I'm half Sicilian, so getting a baseball bat is something in my DNA. That's part like I'm half Palestinian, half Sicilian. The Palestinian side tempers the Sicilian side. Okay, that's a because it's always let's get a baseball bat and go visit these people. That's the way I grew up in Jersey. I can't help. Are you Italian too? Like,
I am half Italian, half Irish.
wow, growing up in Jersey, that was a much more typical combination. Half Palestinian, half Sicilian. I was kind of rare. There weren't
Yeah.
a lot of me's out there.
I tell
Mike,
people all the time, it's like having two devils on either shoulder.
with the Irish and Italian,
Yeah.
it's different. I mean, and at one time, the Irish in the town, my grandparents came from Sicily. The Irish police were not nice to them in the late 1800s,
No.
and then later, generations later, they're all in the same pot, living in the suburbs of New Jersey. It kind of changed. But Mike, before I let you go, where can people follow you? Obviously, Substack, but where else? Where do you want them to follow your great work?
Yeah, so I'm on all the socials, but mainly Substack. Yeah, I've got my Substack page, Michael Fanone. You can follow me on Instagram at Michael Fanone Official. And I've got a YouTube show, The Michael Fanone Show. So if you guys could click and subscribe, it would be greatly appreciated. I don't receive any funding from anyone other than the money that I generate from my Substack, and then I have a GoFundMe that's set up to fund. I do a lot of trips. I've got a couple trips coming up. One to Pittsburgh. I'm going to Kansas. I'll be out in California. I speak to a lot of high school kids and
Oh,
local civics groups about the importance of civic engagement, and it's completely apolitical. It's all about getting involved and staying involved because we've been talking a lot about accountability, Dean.
yeah.
Holding politicians accountable is how we got. Not doing that is how we got into this predicament in the first place.
100%, and that's great, and I hope people check you out. As opposed to Michael, I'm funded by George Soros and Glenn Kirshner. Glenn Kirshner sends me money all the time, so I get 10% whatever Glenn gets. I get 20% of Soros, but I don't get any of that money. Mike, it was great chatting with you, and I hope you come back on. You're more fun to talk to than Glenn. I'm gonna tell Glenn,
No,
and much better than Pete Dominic.
anytime, seriously.
Thanks, brother. Have a great day. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. We had a great sized audience here. They really came out to see you. Mike deserves it. Follow his YouTube show. Go subscribe and like, and of course, support him here on Substack. Have a great day, Mike, and everyone else.
Thanks, Dean.
Take care, brother.